So this is a 58-year-old man, presents with loud snoring, fatigue. The Epworth sleepiness scale, which I'm assuming is the same one that's used here, is 16/24. He also reports morning headache and reflux. His BMI is 37. His neck circumference is 18. I guess my first question is, how typical or atypical this presentation for your patients here in Egypt? Very typical, okay. Okay, so I was wondering mostly about the BMI of 37. Just walking around, I didn't see too many people with BMI of 37. But, okay. Okay, well then, okay, so it's, okay, so why, is there any reason why the morning headache and GERD and reflux are being discussed here? Why is there a reason why I'm including these two? So everybody talks about snoring and sleepiness, but there are kind of other symptoms. Okay, neck circumference is actually pretty much the strongest predictor. I mean, in men, neck circumference over 17 inch, which is 43 centimeter, is like 31% chance of sleep apnea. And it's actually, can anybody think of a reason why it is predictive? Just off the top of your head, why it could be predictive? There's some literature now, and actually we've seen it even when we studied the compliance of the upper airway or the mechanics of the airway. There's some literature now coming from Doug Bradley in Toronto, which is talk about the rostral fluid coming back. So, I mean, this is really, if you take it to its extreme, it's not different than how you have patients who, when they lie supine, they're juggling with JVD. So it's fluid we're all collecting in our legs during the day. And when we're supine, some of these fluids will come back, and overnight, it actually increases so it's a large neck means also potentially large vessels, would also mean a lot of fat deposits. But these are all among the factors. A lot of these are actually passive factors. So to me, large neck is pretty much a predictor. And I remember once, when I'm sitting in airports, I start looking at people and try to estimate their CPAP level. A way to pass time, just looking at someone, say, oh no sleep apnea, CPAP of 10. And I was once, and my wife knew that, so she and I were sitting on the plane, and a guy was walking toward us, and I said, CPAP of 15. And and the trouble is that, as you can tell, I have a loud voice. He probably heard me, and as I was finishing the word, he was putting the CPAP machine in the overhead compartment. So neck circumference is a highly predictive. What about the morning headache? What does it tell us? CO2, it doesn't have to get to the narcosis level, but actually it's a prominent sign, and it's a pounding headache. And this is another symptom I usually try to get more information. What about reflux? But which direction? Is the reflux interrupting the sleep, or reflux happening because sleep is being interrupted? Is there any reason why sleep apnea may worsen reflux, or vice versa? How? How? Okay, so it's actually a lot of an occluded airway. You're trying to breathe against an occluded airway, and eventually you overcome the sphincter tone. Another thing, since a lot of patients with obstructive sleep apnea are also obese, so they have high abdominal pressure. You're right, and again, we're talking about the fluid coming back, so the pressure is favorable, and that's actually one of the. And I think a couple of days ago I showed one of the studies that showed when you treat with nasal CPAP, the reflux would decrease. I use this as one of the things I ask patients who we have patients who would never report sleepiness because it's very hard to take history from them. Or I can't see much of an improvement afterwards. Or they're telling me they're using the CPAP and they're feeling perfect. None of that is true. So I ask about these other symptoms that my patient doesn't know they're directly linked to sleep apnea. So I ask them about morning headache. I ask them about reflux. The trouble, I don't know how it is here in Egypt, but in the States, a lot of people are on PPIs and anti-reflux measures, so it makes it a bit of a hard one to grade. Another symptom I inquire about is nocturia. Do you see any link? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's actually that the system perceives it that way, and actually they have nocturia is 2 to 3 nights consistently. That's one of the signs that also one of the clinical findings that actually improve after treatment. So I have a battery of tests that I try to ask patients about it. This is one of them. Are there any other things that you may see in your patients that are not typical of, at least textbooks don't describe? Do your patients have insomnia? Patients with sleep apnea tend to have insomnia? Or everybody here has insomnia? Because that's a very culturally based question. Well, one of the things we're finding, and again, this is, and what I'm saying may be totally irrelevant to lifestyle in Egypt or Europe, is a lot of our patients, and textbooks don't describe this, do report insomnia as well. And what happens is they will initial sleep fragmentation, and they develop this bad sleep habits. They pull their iPhone out, they put the TV on, they start, and then after a while they just can't sleep. And it becomes more of a continuing habit. And in some studies, even patients with insomnia, 20 to 30% of them have sleep apnea. So it's one of these. So is insomnia one of the complaints you guys see or no? Just hypersomnia. Okay. Okay. Right. So this person is perceiving it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that gets into insomnia because the typical sleep fragmentation with sleep apnea is too short to be recalled. But if they're recalling it, and usually the ones we see most is sleep maintenance insomnia, you're correct. So they may not be, they fall asleep okay, but in an hour or two, things change. Now, one of the other aspects of this, which is at least something we inquire about all the time, is alcohol. Alcohol use in your patients is alcohol, A, will worsen sleep apnea, and 2, may also contribute to sleep maintenance insomnia. And I don't know whether that's a question you routinely ask or not of patients, because some in our societies you would be offended if you ask them the question. But it's one of these that if you don't ask, you won't know. And it's a typical, it's about 90 minutes after falling asleep, they wake up. And it worsens sleep apnea because it affects the upper airway muscles. Any relationship with smoking? That anyone can? What's the prevalence of smoking in Egypt? Can somebody give me a number? Is it known? 40% of the population. Okay. The national average in the U.S. is 24%, 20-some percent. In Utah, which is the Mormon state, which has the same kind of lifestyle values that Muslims have. In Egypt? Yeah, that would be about half the national average in the US. Yeah? Uh-huh. That's actually, if this number is correct, that's impressive. I mean, the number in the US is 20 to 24%. And there are anti-smoking efforts are, I mean, in the US, the pendulum has swung so far that if you're a smoker, you're like something against national interest. I mean, it's like you can't go anywhere, you can't be in a restaurant, it's like. Oh yeah, cigarette smoking. Yeah, this is actually, by the way, has made it to the U.S. This is one of the Arab contributions to American culture. They are basically college students in the U.S. are all being poisoned by hookah. It's actually funny. Yeah, well, I don't never smoked shisha in my life. So my daughter, there are all of these hookah bars in the Detroit area, which now the non-Arabs go to them too. I mean, it's became cool thing. It's a Starbucks equivalent. And when she discovered that I've never had hookah, as we call it there in my life, she said, "What kind of Arab are you?" So, what kind of Arab are you? Never had hookah? So, okay. So we go to the next thing here. See what other thoughts. Okay. Do you guys use any other questionnaires here? What do you have any? I mean, I know everybody uses the Epworth, which is translated into multiple languages. It's validated in Arabic, right? What about, have anybody uses the Berlin questionnaire or Stop Bank or any of these? Stop Bank. Stop Bank? Both? Okay. It probably doesn't matter which one of them you use. The reason I'm starting to like the Stop Bank, it's easy to administer. The Berlin kind of requires a little bit more than a. One problem I found is that when things are like something like the Berlin, maybe a little hard for patients to give me these numbers. I get this, it depends, and maybe, and it's a challenge. Okay. Anatomical exam, or what do we see? Is there a routine exam that's done here for this? I mean, is there like a standard of what you look for in upper airway? Malapati. Malapati is actually the easiest one to, and as I once mentioned, we stole it from the anesthesiologist. It's useful. The trouble, none of these things have a negative predictive value, meaning you open a mouth and you see it wide open. You can't say, oh, you don't have sleep apnea. Pretty much if you see it, it's positive. The sign that you may see in those who things aren't very crowded when you can actually see the back is the lateral narrowing. So you see the airway narrowed, but that's predominantly in men. That sign didn't hold. This is work by Richard Schwab's group in Pennsylvania. That didn't hold in women. And the reason is that there's a lot of literature about lateral narrowing of the airway. And we've done some work. There's an AP, there's a lateral. When you see it, it's useful as you're trying to decide on this one. One other sign, and this may actually be, there may be somebody asked me 2 days ago about anthropology. I'm not seeing too much retronasia around me. I mean, I guess you can tell I'm a sleep doc. I look around at people's features, and I see a lot of retronasia in the U.S. And I don't see it here. I haven't seen it. Well, see, actually, I call this the goatee sign. A young man, most of the young men, or not most, is probably not scientifically accurate, who have goatees, not full beard, actually keep them because of this. Because young men experiment with their looks, and they grow a goatee and say, oh, you look nice. So they keep it, and it's hidden behind it. I tried to grow a goatee once. My wife told me I'll look like a terrorist, so I shaved in a day. So it didn't work. So another thing is in those who have retrognathia or small jaw, is the teeth imprints on the tongue, and you can actually see them. I mean, so it's not macroglossia, it's relative macroglossia. Again, we see this more, I don't know the problem, but we tend to see this. The small jaw, this is a big problem, because at the end of the day, you can have we call it, the jaw is the room, the tongue is the furniture, and the ear is what's left. So if you have a small room, your furniture is going to look crowded, even if you have a normal. Now, none of these things tell us, if they're all normal, it doesn't mean somebody doesn't have sleep apnea. That's really the key thing. This is the one about the neck circumference, which is, I think this still holds 17 centimeter, 17 inch, 43 centimeter is a fairly strong predictor. Okay, so this is just a segment of a polysomnogram. I hate when it does this. Okay, I'll try to. So, what kind of flow signals are used in the labs here? What do you use? Okay, so you use both the nasal pressure and the thermistor. So so you're following the ASM for scoring. The nasal pressure is pretty much the best one. Are people familiar with the RIP, with the inductance plethysmography? And it's actually, go ahead. Yeah, so this is a classic look of upper airway obstruction. The airway is obstructed, so the diaphragm is descending, the abdomen is going out, but there is no air going in the thorax to fill it. So it will go in. And that's why actually the sum, this is an algebraic sum. The RIP sum is truly a sum of two signals. When this is done right, it's actually beautiful. And some places they differentiate that to generate flow, but this is a very convincing sign. Now this may help you if you see a hypopnea, or in the East Coast in the US they call it hypopnea, so I don't know which way it's pronounced in Egypt. If you see a hypopnea, if you see things starting to look out of phase with some snoring and flow limitation, that tells you that now this is an obstructive hypopnea as opposed to a central hypopnea. I don't know if it makes much of a difference, but in terms of management. Okay, now this gentleman, we put him on nasal CPAP, as you can see from the green part. It looks like his events disappeared quickly. He has a beautiful response to CPAP. Can you look at this and find one reason to select one pressure over another? This is more of a respiratory physiology question than it's a, because all the events disappeared. Let's see if there is a, oh, that is. 10 desaturations, okay. This is 88, this is 90, yeah. Okay, It's actually a perfect read of this. I actually start reading sleep studies by what I call it interrogate the hypnogram. Okay, stole this from the cardiologists who interrogate pacemakers. And I see there's a lot of useful information in it. So this one is a clear one. Now, you can see all the ups and downs. What I'd like to see is an oximetry that is a straight line, okay? It's like a pencil-drawn eyebrow, very thin. And what that tells me that we probably normalized lung volume as well. So there's no more oscillations. I mean, some could argue here that this patient doesn't have events and could say, well, that's okay, it's a 92 saturation, but I see these oscillations. To me, there's still some variation in the respiration. You're right, so this is the perfect read. Now here when you're calling it arousal, but we really don't know. We're not looking at the EEG, but you've interpreted correctly that something is making him oscillate. Yeah, but there's one here. Yeah, I mean, there is one, but you can actually reach the same conclusion just looking at this, that there's something oscillating. So the ideal, the sweet spot in CPAP. Now this is where technical systems don't help you. I mean, if you have automated scoring, it's not going to help you. That just doesn't do it. This is actually where a clinician input is needed, because somebody could show you a table, AHI will be 0 in all of these, and you're going to have to decide which one is the sweet spot in this. And sometimes in nice one you can see the pressure. With every change in pressure, things are improving. Okay. Now this is an area where I like to emphasize. Okay. This thing's not listening to me today. Is part of the problem in all of scoring hypopneas. So how do you score hypopnea in Egypt? Which parameters are used? Decrease. Okay, so you use the 3% threshold. Okay, so in the US now we have multiple. We have Medicare rules, which is 4%. And when we have patients who are Medicare, we have to use that, and then in others we use 3% or arousal. The problem is the only signal that's really robust that even lends itself to automated analysis is saturation. The problem is, I call this a circular logic. So if one of us here, somebody who's thin, stops breathing for 10 seconds, how much are they going to decrease their saturation? Not much. Make somebody a little bit more bigger, obese. How much are they going to decrease their saturation? A lot more because of lung volume. So what's happening here, this is a non-obese individual, okay? This is the FRC, functional residual capacity. This is the only thing that we have as an oxygen store. So if I'm diving, this is what I have to live with, which is about 2.5 liters. Okay? Now this patient here is obese. This is his lung volume at that time. So if he stops breathing, if he's taking a very small breath, that's all he has. So he will use up that oxygen much faster and desaturate much faster. Plus, he could be starting closer to the 60-90 oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve, so any change in PO2 will make him drop rapidly. And that's one big problem I find with the desaturation. And I think at some point we need a solution around it. I think 3% is a good compromise. It allows you to capture most of them. Now, one thing I want to mention about oximetry, which I did not know till about a year or two ago. I was taught that one by a hemoglobin person, and that's relevant to smoking. A patient who smokes has carboxyhemoglobin. The pulse oximetry will overestimate saturation, because pulse oximeter doesn't distinguish oxy from carboxy. So if you see a 94% in a smoker who has 4% carboxy, their actual saturation is only 90. And as I understand from many smokers, the last thing they do at night before they go to sleep is smoke a cigarette. So they're starting with that level of oxygen. Another thing that smoking does, which I think it's now, it's in the 2012 ASM scoring of respiratory event, it shifts the oxyhemoglobin dissociation to the left. So you don't give up your oxygen as well. So for a given decrease in PaO2, you don't show as much desaturation. This is kind of an obscure point that is, you almost have to look into. And I did not know this. I mean, and I think I'm a respiratory physiologist. I thought it would be clear in my head. It wasn't. So these are all considerations of what affects your carboxy. And that's important as you're trying to make a decision. This is not for when a technician is scoring it. You are trying to make a decision and you're trying to decide, does this patient have a disease or not? These are all issues. When do we have to stop now? Okay, well, I guess that's out before I close. Any questions you guys have for me? I mean, okay. Very good. Well, thank you all.